Hi, I am Abigail, and on New Year's Eve, my sister didn't just toast to family, she shattered my life by exposing my $32,400,000 0 cents fortune, then whispered to my father about forging my signature to siphon it. The room froze, but the real betrayal was the contract I found later, signed in my name, to fund her empire. That night, I turned their greed into their undoing. I pulled into the driveway 5 minutes late, but the house was already lit up like it had been expecting guests for hours. I took a breath before stepping out of the car. New Year's at my parents' house in Boise, Idaho hadn't changed. Inside, the dining room was already full, every seat taken, except the one right next to the swinging kitchen door. Even the cousins' kids had better placement. I stood at the threshold a beat too long before my father waved from the head of the table. "There she is," he said. "Grab a chair, Abigail." As if one had been saved for me. I sat down quietly, trying not to bump the tray of buttered rolls beside me. I was the youngest daughter, always the quiet one. Not by nature, really, but by need. When you grow up with a sister like Victoria, who could win a room just by flipping her hair or crying at the right moment, you learn there's less space for silence. I'd moved to San Diego 12 years ago, started a biotech company, left it, built a second, sold it, developed a third. Still, when I came home for the holidays, I was just Abigail, the one who didn't FaceTime enough, who sent gift cards instead of showing up to baby showers. I sipped water from the stemmed glass in front of me. No one asked me about California or about work or whether I was seeing someone, not even out of politeness, until Victoria stood up. She clinked her spoon against her champagne flute with the kind of practiced elegance only she could pull off. "I just want to say," she began, placing a hand gently on Dad's shoulder, "how grateful I am that we're all here together. It's been a tough year for some of us, and I know not everyone could make it, but I think it's beautiful when family shows up." A few aunts nodded. My cousin Hannah snapped a picture on her phone. "But you know what's wild?" Victoria's smile grew sharper as she glanced at me. "It's how someone who never says a word at these dinners, who always seems so private, could be sitting on nearly $32 million, 0 cents. Forks froze midair, glasses paused half-raised. "She sold her third medical patent last quarter," Victoria added, tones syrupy. "I Googled it. Real estate filings, company exit, everything. I mean, Abigail, why so shy?" As she sat, I caught her lean toward Dad, whispering, "The papers are ready. She'll never check." My pulse didn't spike. My shoulders didn't rise. I just looked at her and then at my father, who blinked like he'd misheard. My mother's mouth opened before any sound came out. "Wait, is that true?" she asked finally. I didn't answer. "We could have used your help," my father said, his voice low but carrying. "Victoria's nonprofit still hasn't taken off. She's trying to do good. Why didn't you tell us?" I looked down at my napkin. My mother leaned forward. "You always wanted to feel included, right? Maybe this is your chance. You could help your sister. Help all of us." Something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage, not yet. More like heat, rising behind a closed door. They didn't ask how I'd built that money or what it had cost or if I was okay being across the country alone most holidays. They just saw dollar signs and decided it meant I owed them something. "Family supports family," Victoria added. "We all pitch in where we can." She meant I should pitch in where she couldn't. I reached for my glass of water again. As I lifted it, my bracelet caught the light. Platinum, understated. A gift I'd bought for myself the day after my second sale. A reminder I never needed anyone's permission to succeed. I took a sip. Still, I said, "Nothing. Not yet." The silence from dinner didn't linger. It shattered like it always did in this house once plates were cleared and someone shouted, "Let's do gifts!" like they were saving us all from a fire. People shuffled toward the tree, laughing, bumping into one another, pretending nothing awkward had happened at the table. I stayed seated for a moment, watching them. Later, in the kitchen, I overheard Victoria on the phone. "Once she signs, the trust's ours. She's too trusting." Eventually, I stood and followed. The living room had changed little over the years. The youngest cousins were already tearing through their presents. My mother passed around gifts with speed, calling names with sugary brightness. Dad stood off to the side. Someone pressed a small box into my hand. To the label read, "No handwriting, no tag, no card, just the letter." I looked up. No one was looking back at me, not even Victoria. I opened the box carefully, more out of habit than anticipation. At the bottom, nestled against the corner, was a silver frame. Inside it, a photo, the family, all of them. It was Victoria's college graduation, an event I hadn't been able to attend because I was pitching a prototype to a panel of investors in Portland, Oregon. My absence hadn't been subtle back then, and now it was literal. I wasn't in the photo. Not cropped, not blurred, just not there. Victoria turned slightly, clearly waiting for a reaction. "We thought it was symbolic," she said, smiling like she was doing me a kindness. "You're always so private anyway." No one laughed. No one objected either. That made it worse. I held the frame steady, but my fingers were tense, and then it hit me. Memorial Day, 8 years ago. I'd flown in last minute, late because of a delayed flight. I hadn't planned to stay long, but I wanted to try. Someone handed me a photo album that Victoria had made, a scrapbook of family memories. Every page featured them: birthdays, lake trips, school dances, even candid breakfasts. In some shots, I was there, but half cropped out. In most, I was missing entirely. When I asked about it, Victoria shrugged. "You're always off doing your own thing. We used the best shots we had." I'd smiled, nodded, set the album down, and never brought it up again. I blinked back to the present as Dad chuckled over something in his hand. Another gift. He looked over his shoulder at me and said casually, as if commenting on the weather, "You've always been the one who didn't need anything. It's time you gave back." It wasn't cruel, that was the part that got me. It wasn't even meant to sting. Just a belief like gravity. Abigail is fine. She always figures it out. She doesn't need celebration or space or acknowledgement, just money. And I'd given it. I thought back to Victoria's rent 4 years ago when she was finding herself between fellowships, my mom's unexpected surgery bill when the insurance claim got denied, Dad's car repair during the worst snowstorm. None of them asked for help in front of others. It was always whispered, always behind a closed door, and always forgotten. They didn't say thank you. They didn't even remember. They just thought, "She can." I looked back down at the frame. My grip had tightened without me noticing. There was a thin fracture now running diagonally across the photo right through Victoria's shoulder. No one saw it. They gave me a picture, I thought, of a family I was never in, and asked me to fund the sequel. I placed the box back down on the carpet beside me, gently. The party rolled on. More gifts were exchanged, more drinks were poured, but I sat there framed, silent, cracked. By the time everyone had retreated to their rooms and the house finally fell quiet, I climbed the stairs slowly, barefoot, carrying only the thin box with the cracked picture frame. Inside my old room, nothing had really changed. I set the frame down on the desk, then sat in the chair I hadn't touched in years. I pulled open the bottom drawer. That drawer was my time capsule, but tucked in the back, beneath a folder labeled scholarships, was a folded envelope. I knew exactly what it was before I touched it. 6 years ago, I wrote a letter to my parents. I remember the night sitting in my apartment, exhausted. After helping Victoria pay off her third bounced loan from the wellness startup, she ran into the ground. I never sent the letter. I didn't even seal it, but I kept it. I unfolded the pages. "I'm tired of being the scaffolding that holds up a house no one lets me live in." That was the first line. Back then, I'd worried it sounded bitter. Dramatic, as Mom would say, but tonight it sounded almost too gentle. I leaned back, resting the letter against my knee. My mind wandered to a dorm hallway years ago, Victoria crying into her phone, something about a billing error. Her financial aid hadn't processed and she was going to lose her classes. I was 23, working overnight shifts at a campus research lab while studying for my MCATs. I maxed out my credit card to cover her tuition. Dad said it was the right thing to do. "You're older," he told me. "She's still finding herself." But I wasn't older by much, just 2 years, and I was already expected to carry her even then. The letter in my hands felt heavier. My thoughts drifted again, this time to 2012. Our mother had collapsed at work. Stress, they said, or maybe something with her thyroid. I was in a clinical trial meeting across the country. I didn't even make it to the hospital. But I wired the money for the surgery that insurance didn't cover. And at every dinner since, when she talked about how my girls were there for me, she looked at Victoria. Always Victoria, because she sat by her bedside because she brought flowers. Never mind that the bill came to $8,200.00 and I paid $6,500.00 of it. I looked back at the letter in my lap. For 6 years I'd been afraid to send it, afraid of what it might ruin. But I was beginning to see that everything had already fractured. A soft sound in the hallway made me freeze. Footsteps. Then a whisper through the door, light and casual, like nothing had happened earlier. "Hey," Victoria said. "You know they're going to ask you about Vale soon, the house co-signing. Just say yes now, it'll be easier." I opened the door, staring her down. "Easier for who? You've already forged my name on the trust transfer, haven't you?" Her eyes widened, but she didn't deny it. I didn't answer. I didn't even move. But something in me clicked. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even shock. It was like a lock turning inside me, slow and deliberate. I stood and walked over to my suitcase, pulled out my laptop, sat back at the desk, and opened QuickBooks. The folder was still there, 200822022, family expenses. I clicked line after line. $3,100.00. Emergency loan not repaid, $2,800.00. Mom's therapy sessions, $8,900.00. Car replacement for Dad after the crash, $21,000.00. Victoria's company debt absorption, $8,200.00. Surgery copay, $2,800.00. Bailout for Uncle Raymond's tax error, $2,700.00. Funeral expenses for Grandma split among the siblings, only I paid. Scroll. At the very bottom, in bold, $0.00. Acknowledgement. I stared at that number. You don't realize how cold it feels until your love is turned into accounting. Sleep never really came. I laid in bed. Eventually, the cold drove me up. I slipped on an old sweatshirt and headed downstairs. Outside, the front windows, inside, it was anything but. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and burnt toast. My mother stood by the counter pouring coffee like it was any other day. Like the night before hadn't happened. Like my bank statements weren't echoing louder than her voice ever had. She didn't greet me, didn't even glance my way. I poured myself water from the fridge. Footsteps followed a few seconds later. Victoria entered, full makeup already on, not a hair out of place. She set a yellow legal pad on the counter in front of me. The top read 2023 Family Planning, below that handwritten in blue gel pen. Item 1, Vale Mortgage Proposal, Abigail. I looked at her. She was buttering a bagel. "You wrote my name," I said quietly. She didn't look up. "They'll bring it up today. I just thought I'd prep you." I held the pad for a beat. "Prep me?" I repeated slower this time. "You're the one who's good with money." "Everyone says that," she added, finally looking over with a half smile. "Come on, this is your chance to make a real impact." The words settled in the pit of my stomach. From the table, my mother chimed in as she stirred cream into her coffee. "You've always been good with numbers, Abigail. Maybe this is your way of contributing since you're not as present." Not present. I'd been paying for their presence while disappearing in plain sight. I almost laughed. Not the amused kind, the kind you let out when you're standing over your own grave. Then came the familiar rustle of a newspaper. My father's voice followed. "Let's not make this another one of your episodes." That stopped me cold. I hadn't cried in front of them since 2010, when I showed up to Grandma's funeral in scrubs, having driven overnight from a double shift. They said I was being dramatic when I excused myself halfway through the reception. I folded the notepad and handed it back to Victoria. "You want me to co-sign for Vale?" I said, "but none of you have even acknowledged what I've already given." My mother sighed and reached for a croissant. "We all give in different ways, sweetie." My father lowered the paper just enough to add, "Not everything's about keeping score." Victoria leaned on the counter with a glib smile. "Honestly, Abigail, you make everything so heavy. You've always been like that, heavy. Invisible, but heavy." I snapped back. "Heavy? Or inconvenient, because I see through your lies? I found the contract, Victoria. My signature. Your handwriting." Her smile vanished. I stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked back upstairs without another word. I closed my door quietly behind me and sat back at the desk. The document was still open on my laptop. Line after line of itemized love. I clicked print. Once the printer stopped humming, I slid the papers into a clean envelope and wrote across the front, "If I'm not seen, at least I'll be read." I held it for a second, then walked back downstairs. The living room was still quiet. No one had come in yet. I walked to the mantel. There was a framed photo there. Victoria's wedding, taken 6 years ago. Everyone was smiling. I was technically in it at the far end, barely visible, cropped halfway out by a decorative plant. I placed the envelope beside the frame, straightened it, walked away. I didn't come here to start a war, but sometimes the ones you love corner you into becoming the fire. Victoria knocked once, then cracked my door without waiting. "Dad wants to talk about some things," she said like it was no big deal. I tucked the QuickBooks file back into my laptop and closed the lid. "Things," I echoed, standing slowly. "Of course." Downstairs, the living room had been rearranged like we were preparing for a negotiation. My father sat at the head of the coffee table, shoulders squared like he was chairing a board meeting. My mother perched at the armrest. Victoria held her tea with both hands, eyes locked on me. No one offered a seat. I stood anyway. Dad cleared his throat. "Let's not dance around it. This house will be yours one day, Abigail." A pause. "Too long, but right now," he added. "Victoria and her baby need support, and we're all in agreement that helping family is what matters." I glanced at Victoria's stomach. She wasn't showing yet, not visibly, but the timing was convenient. Mom chimed in. "Think of it as a down payment on your legacy. Your contribution now makes space for the family's future." "Legacy," I repeated under my breath, then louder. "That's one way to put it." Dad leaned forward. "We just want to ensure everyone's taken care of. You've got the resources. And Victoria, she's at a turning point." Victoria nodded along like a bobblehead. "You mean I've got money?" I said evenly. "And Victoria has need." Mom's smile faltered. "Well, we're not saying it like that. We're just saying you've already received so much, honey." "Have I?" I asked. She looked relieved I'd opened that door. "Your college tuition? That used Honda we gave you for med school?" I cut in. "Everything you've mentioned happened before I was old enough to rent a car." My father folded his arms. "You wouldn't even have what you do now without our sacrifices." Victoria looked amused. "I mean, come on, Abigail, we all know you've had a leg up." I walked toward the mantel without a word, picked up the envelope, took my time, then, in full view of all three, I unfolded the pages and began reading. "My contributions to this family by year," I began, my voice calm, steady, too even for the pulse pounding in my chest. 2009, Victoria's vet bills, $3,500, 0 cents. 2012, Mom's surgery gap, $7,900, 0 cents. I didn't pause for effect. I didn't raise my voice. 2018, Dad's IRS lien, $16,500, 0 cents. Quietly settled. 2020, Victoria's startup loan, $25,000, 0 cents. I looked up. No one spoke. I didn't ask for thanks. I said, "I never sent an invoice, but don't sit here and act like I've done nothing just because I didn't frame it like a favor." My father looked like someone had pulled the air out of him. My mother blinked, but Victoria rolled her eyes. You make money off investments, Abigail. That's not the same as struggling. You don't know what it's like to be scared about how to feed a baby. I stared at her. No, but I do know what it's like to starve emotionally in a house full of people who think silence is loyalty. And I know what it's like to find my name forged on a $10 million 0-cent transfer to your offshore account, I added, slamming the contract on the table. Victoria paled, speechless. They didn't get it. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. I lowered the papers and took a deep breath. I saw the draft will in your drawer, Mom. She flinched, just slightly, but it was enough. My name's not on it anymore. The silence that followed felt cavernous. Dad's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Victoria didn't even bother hiding her smirk this time. I stepped back, folding the papers again, tucking them into my coat pocket. You don't have to explain, I said. I've already rewritten what I thought I knew. I grabbed my bag from the stair rail, slid into my coat. No one moved to stop me. Until, don't do this, my father said sharply, voice low and warning. You'll regret breaking up the family. I turned at the door. You already did that, I replied. I just finally noticed. Then I left. The next morning, I didn't knock. I walked in through the side door, documents in my bag, coat still buttoned against the cold. Victoria looked up from her seat at the kitchen island. She was sipping something green from a glass straw and had that smug half-smile that always came when she thought she'd won. You came to your senses? She said, barely glancing up. I didn't answer right away. I set my bag down on the counter and unzipped it calmly, deliberately. I came, I said, pulling out the first folder to get what's mine. That caught her attention. From the front room, my father's voice called out, What's going on in there? Don't worry, I replied without turning. I'll explain it all. I motioned to the man standing behind me, my attorney. He didn't speak until I handed him the first file. Wilson, he said, addressing Victoria formally, this contains records showing you illegally moved funds from your sister's trust into a joint account under false pretense without her knowledge. Victoria stiffened. What are you talking about? I didn't... He continued flipping through pages. Item 2. Credit card debt built posthumously through a shared business account that listed Abigail as the primary guarantor, over $41,000 in unauthorized charges. My father stepped in, then, his tone demanding, Where did you get this? My lawyer answered calmly, Wire transfers, digital authorization records, and this, he held up a signed document, was filed under your IP address, sir. Dad's face paled. And I filed formal charges for identity theft, I said. You'll get the letters this week. My mother had appeared now too, still in her robe. I handed her a separate envelope. This one's for you. She opened it slowly. Her eyes scanned the document and then her hand jerked. This house, I said, legally belongs to me. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. You refinanced it 4 years ago using my business without consent. That's fraud. Mom, federal. You wouldn't do this, Victoria hissed, her voice cracking. I looked her dead in the eye. I already did. Silence fell so heavily you could hear the fridge humming behind us. Victoria's face shifted, defiance collapsing into desperation. Her eyes welled up, and before I could take a breath, she stood and lunged forward. You're my sister, she said, her arms reaching for me. Please don't do this. Don't tear us apart. I stepped back. You called me a walking ATM at Memorial Day, remember? My voice was low, clear. You told people I just write checks. That was a joke. No, I interrupted. It was the first honest thing you've said in years. My mother clutched the envelope tighter, still not speaking. My father ran a hand through his thinning hair and muttered something I didn't catch. I turned, picked up the final folder from my bag, walked to the dining table and laid it down gently. No one followed. Inside the folder, copies of every email, bank transfers, proof of the wire fraud, credit card screenshots, IRS liens, and on the top page, a handwritten note. This was my final deposit into your lives. Don't spend it all in one place. As I turned to leave, no one stopped me. I opened the door myself, stepped into the cold, and closed it behind me. Not softly, not gently. I hadn't even taken my coat off when the first voicemail played. "Hey, Abigail, this is Ethan from Horizon Ventures. I just, got some messages." "Did you really forge tax documents? There's talk about an audit." I stood there in the center of my living room, staring at my phone like it had just turned into a weapon. Another voicemail clicked in. "Abigail, call me back immediately. This can't be true, but investors are nervous. Someone said you embezzled money." My chest tightened. I walked to the kitchen, set the phone down, and poured myself some water. A dozen more messages followed, variations on a theme: hesitation, accusation, doubt. Then came the email, forwarded by a colleague. The subject line read, "FYI, anonymous source." The message included screenshots, fake letterheads using my old nonprofit's branding, claims that I'd stolen from the organization. Attached was a file titled IRS Audit 2022, clearly forged, sloppy, but believable to the untrained eye, and the sender no name, just a random Gmail. But the signature smelled familiar. It was the kind of mess only Victoria and my mother could have brewed together. That afternoon, my publicist texted, "You're trending on a business podcast. Victoria said you were struggling emotionally for years." I sat down slowly. "They're rewriting my life again," I whispered. This wasn't just a character smear, it was strategic, coordinated. It had the fingerprints of two people who'd always known how to make me doubt myself and now wanted everyone else to do it too. By 3:00 p.m., another message popped up on my nonprofit's internal Slack. Someone had called an emergency board meeting. The words "transition leadership" were flagged in a screenshot one of my old teammates sent. The pit in my stomach turned to heat. Victoria had taken my silence as an invitation. She'd gone into the one place I'd kept sacred, our childhood nonprofit, and painted me as unstable. I found an email draft on her laptop, titled Abigail's Breakdown, ready to leak to the press. Again, I didn't RSVP to the board meeting. I showed up. The conference room was glass-walled. I arrived 5 minutes after they started, holding a thin black folder. Victoria's eyes widened the moment she saw me. "Oh," she said, "we didn't expect." I didn't speak, just walked to the table. The room quieted as I placed the folder down, opened it. Inside a copy of the forged audit, emails traced to my father's IP address, timeline of funds rerouted from my nonprofit account to Victoria's Foundation's emergency fund, and a letter addressed to the board. "If you attempt to erase me again, I will drag this entire table into the daylight." I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to cry. I just looked around at the faces, people I'd worked with, mentored, some I'd helped during their lowest points. They couldn't look me in the eye. Victoria cleared her throat. I slid a flash drive across the table. That's the context. No one spoke. I left the meeting without saying goodbye. Drove home because for the first time I realized just how far my own family would go to silence me. I walked through my front door just after sunset. The house was still quiet. I plugged in my phone to charge and washed my hands. Then the phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text only. "You should have stayed the silent one. Get ready." The envelope was thin, pale yellow, folded too neatly for something so absurd. The concierge handed it over as if it were just another Tuesday memo. "This came in certified this morning," she said. I took it, opened it, and the second I saw the heading "Restraining Order," I had to sit down, filed by my own mother. It stated in the most sterile legal ease that I was barred from attending the upcoming Wilson family New Year's Gala, that my presence was deemed emotionally disruptive, potentially erratic, and my favorite, dangerously vindictive. I nearly laughed, not out of humor but the sheer exhaustion of it all. My silence was their biggest fear, I muttered. By noon, Victoria had posted a video. She wore white, of course. Her voice had that tight gentleness that only people who love being passive-aggressive could perfect. "I know the holidays are hard," she said, voice trembling just enough for sympathy. "But some people, when given success, they forget who they are. They forget their family. But I choose healing. I choose light. I choose forgiveness." The comments were flooded. "Stay strong, Victoria. Your sister sounds toxic. This is why boundaries matter." I got a message from my old assistant. It was a voice note recorded inside the Wilson Gala planning session. "She's not to be mentioned," someone said. "We don't want the press asking questions," another chimed in. "Keep her name off the donor wall." Even my legacy was on mute. So, I did the only thing they didn't expect anymore. I showed up that night. I arrived 15 minutes before the doors opened. I didn't slip in. I walked tall, dressed in a deep burgundy gown. At the front table, I smiled at the hostess and handed her a sleek black USB. For the slideshow, I said, "Legacy donors." She took it with a nod, slipped it into the laptop without a second glance. Inside, I spotted old professors, a few investors, local press, all of them sipping champagne and waiting for the program to begin. I stood near the back, arms folded. When the screen lit up and the music started, the first slide was innocent enough, photos from past galas. Then came the video. It began with a timestamp, then my father's face. I signed those forms. Abigail had nothing to do with the nonprofit's transfer of assets. It was me. I pressured her to stay quiet. She didn't want any of this. He looked off camera, uneasy. Next, a notarized document flashed onto the screen, confirming me, as the original founder, sole legal owner and primary donor of the organization. Then the receipts. Bank transfers from the nonprofit account to an entity under Victoria's name, flights billed to the charity card, a salon invoice for nearly $4,500, 0 cents, listed under mental wellness retreat. A final clip played. Victoria's voice, recorded secretly. "Once Abigail's out, we'll sell her patents too." The room went silent. Victoria gasped. "Turn it off," she shrieked. But it was too late. She lunged at the laptop. A woman from the event team pulled her back. My mother stumbled. A voice from the crowd cried out, "Is this true?" I stepped forward. "I never needed applause," I said, keeping my voice even. "I just won't be erased anymore." No one moved. I turned, passing a line of stunned faces, past the cameras, past the whispers. And then I saw him, my former fiancé. He stood at the corner of the bar, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. As I walked past, he called out, just loud enough, "Oh, can we talk?" I paused just outside the gala. His voice had cracked something open, but not in the way he might have hoped. He took a slow step forward, hesitant. "I was scared of your light," he said, voice low. "Of what it showed me about my shadows." "And you knew about their plan, didn't you?" I asked, voice icy. He looked away, guilty, and then I nodded. "I wish you healing," I said evenly. "But I'm not your rehab." He didn't respond, just stood there, hands in his pockets like he still didn't know what to do with them. I walked away this time fully. That chapter, like so many others tonight, was closed. When I got home, I tossed my clutch onto the counter and pulled my heels off. In the quiet that followed, I reached into my coat pocket and took out a single, folded napkin. Only this time, where my name used to be printed next to Victoria's on the table cards, it was blank. I smoothed it flat on the kitchen counter. "Funny," I whispered. It took removing my name for me to finally own it. I just sat there with the napkin in front of me like a strange kind of peace offering. From who, I wasn't sure. Around 10, I heard, "Dwa?" "Dwa." I rose and walked over. Another envelope. No return address, no frills, but I knew the handwriting instantly. It was my father's. Inside was a short note. No apology, no warmth, just a simple statement. "I've submitted the resignation paperwork to the Foundation's board, effective immediately. Voting rights 51% and executive authority transferred to Abigail Wilson per original charter." Attached was a notarized copy. I stood there for a while. But I didn't cry. Not from relief, not from regret. This wasn't justice, I said aloud, setting the documents into my drawer. It was just acknowledgement. And somehow that was enough. The next day I met my former assistant for lunch at a small cafe in Tucson, Arizona. She brought along someone new, an intern she was mentoring. The girl reminded me of myself at 20. Halfway through our coffee, she asked me, "Do you ever regret not speaking up earlier?" I stirred my spoon in slow circles. I used to think staying quiet made me the bigger person, I said gently. Now I know silence is only power when you choose it. I'd spent years pouring into others, afraid to claim space, afraid to be called difficult, dramatic, ungrateful. That fear had cost me a lot, but not anymore. By evening, I was back at my desk, surrounded by boxes of old proposals, new mission drafts, and nonprofit documents waiting to be born again, this time with no edits but mine. My new foundation didn't carry the Wilson name. It carried mine. No hidden credits, no shadow signatures, just one name. Abigail, and it was enough. That night I opened the window. I stood there for a moment, arms folded, heart still. My name won't be erased again, I whispered, not from papers, not from rooms, and not from myself. The cold swept in, but I didn't shut it out. I was still standing. This time I stayed, but the scars of their betrayal linger, a quiet reminder that trust, once broken, leaves cracks no victory can fully mend.